All right, so today we are going to factor out the greatest common factor, which is called the GCF from polynomials. And then we're going to factor using grouping and factor trinomials where a is not equal to 1. All right, so let's talk about the greatest common factor, or GCF. So you want to look for a monomial. So that's just an expression with only one term, like you might have 3x or 8x squared. It's the greatest common factor of all the terms in the polynomial. So let's look at the example down below. We're looking for the GCF. So what do they have in common? What goes into each one of those terms? So if I look at the numbers there, 6, 9, and 18, what's a number that all three of those are divisible thereby? So I'm thinking 2, no, 2 doesn't go into 9. Oh, 3. 3 goes into 6, 3 goes into 9, and 3 goes into 18. Is there anything larger than that? No, 6 doesn't go into all those, so we're going to go with 3. What about the variable x? Does it go into, is there an x in every single term? No. It's not in the last term there. So they do not have x, all three do not have x in common. What about the y's? Oh, yep, they have, all of them have a y there. So what's the smallest power of y in any of those? It'd be y to the third. So 3y to the third times what is 6x to the second y to the third? That would be 2x squared. 3y to the third times what is 9xy to the fourth? That would be a 3xy. And then 3y to the third times what is an 18y to the fifth? 3 times 6 is 18, and then y to the third times what is y to the fifth? It'd be y to the second, because you add the powers there. So there we did it. We factored out the greatest common factor from this polynomial. All right, so we're going to do the same with all these examples. So letter A there, they don't have any numbers in common. What about the variable? Yep, y. So what's the smallest power of y in those two? It'd be y to the second. So then y to the second times what is 9y to the fifth? Well, it'd be a 9. And then y to what power there? So 2 plus what is 5? It'd be a 3. And then you took out the y to the second. You need a placeholder over there, so you need a 1. If it's helpful to you, sometimes people will put a 1 there, and then, oh yeah, you took the y to the second out, there's a 1 left. All right, let's try letter B there. What do all three of those have in common number-wise? Let's see, 2. Yep, 2 goes into those. Anything greater than 2? Well, 3, nope, 4. Oh, 5, 6, nope, 6 goes into 6, and 6 goes to 12, but not into 8. So that's 2 is our largest number. What about variables? Well, only 2 of them have x's, so that's not, they don't have it in common. Oh, t's, they all have a single t. So 2t times what is 6x to the second t? So 2 times 3 is 6. And then we're going to need the x to the second, and we already took the t out. 2 times what there is 8, it'd be a 4. And then we need the x, and we already took the t out. Minus 2 times what is a 12 there, it's going to be a 6. And we already took the t out. So that is what we have for factoring that one. Let's go to the next one. What do they have in common? Well, variable x they don't have in common. So what about numbers? What goes into 5 that also goes into 20? Oh yeah, 5 does. So 5 times x squared there is 5x squared. 5 times what is a minus 20? It'd be a minus 4. Letter D there, taking out the GCF, what do they have in common? A 2. Because 2 goes into 8 and 2 goes into 2. What about x's? Yep, the smallest power of x in there is x. And 2x times what is 2x squared? It'd be an x. 2x times what is 8x? It'd be a 4. All right, letter E, what do they have in common? Well, they don't share x's, but they certainly share a 4 in all of those. So let's take a 4 out. So if you're left with 4 in that first term there, you got an x squared left. Take the 4 out of the next term there, you have an x left. Take the 4 out of that term, you need a placeholder, and that's got to be a 1. Because if you redistribute the 4 through, you'll get right back to 4x squared plus 4x minus 4. All right, so now on to factoring by grouping. So you can factor by grouping when you have an even number of terms. So if you can pair them up. So in this case, we're going to pair up the first two and pair up the last two and see if that works. Sometimes you have to rearrange them if it doesn't work when you got an even number of terms like that. And we're talking about like 4 terms, 6 terms, 8 terms, and so on and so forth. So in the first two there, what do they have in common? An A. So if you take an A out, what are you left with? What about in the second set? What do they have in common? A 6. Then what are you left with in each term? An X, and then a plus a Y. And now you want to look at these two terms. What do they have in common? X plus Y. What's left over on the outsides? A plus 6. All right, let's factor these by grouping. The first two there, what do they have in common? An M. What's left? P squared plus 7. What about the second set? Well, they don't share the p's, but 3 goes in the first term and also goes in the second term, so they share a 3. So then we're left with p squared. And 3 times what is 21? It'd be a 7. So then looking at those, notice they share. These two terms have a p squared plus 7, the parentheses there in common. And then what's left on the outsides? M plus 3. All right, so next one's here. Pair them up. What does the first there have in common? Looks like they're both even numbers, so 2. So anything larger? Well, 4 goes in 8, but 4 doesn't go into 14, and then 8 doesn't go into 14, so 2 is the largest number. And then what's the highest power of, or the lowest power of x in those? It'd be x squared. So 2x squared times what is 8x to the third? That would be a 4x. Remember, because you add the powers and you get x to the third. And then plus 2x squared times what is 14x squared? That would be a 7. The second set there, what goes into 20? That also goes into 35. That'd be a 5. 5 times what is 20x? That'd be 4x. 5 times what is 35? That would be a 7. What do those two sets have in common? They have a 4x plus 7. What's left over on the outsides? 2x squared plus 5. All right, so what do the first two there have in common there? They have a 2. 2 goes into 6 and 2 goes into 4. That's the largest number that goes into both. What about highest or lowest power of x there is x squared. 2x squared times what is 6x to the third? That'd be a 3x. 2x squared times what is 4x squared? That'd be a minus 2. Second set over there, what do they have in common? A 5. 5 times what is 15x would be a 3x. 5x times what is a minus 10? That'd be a minus 2. What do they have in common? 3x minus 2. What's left over on the outsides? 2x squared plus 5. All right, so then this side, if I group those in that order there, notice they don't have anything in common. So I might have to rearrange them. So I think I'm going to bring the, see how they've got, there's two 2's and then there are A's in common. So I think I'm going to move the A terms next to each other and then the 2 terms next to each other. And the sign that's in front of it goes with it. So that minus 2x, I'm going to put that next. And then plus AZ and then minus y squared, minus AY squared. All right, so the first two terms there have in common there a 2. And then I'm left with y squared minus x. The second set there has an a in common. And so that's not going to work. Do you see how the parentheses don't match? That doesn't usually happen. Almost every single time they do match. So this one here is just not possible. So you could rearrange this, but notice one of the terms there has an x in it and one of them has a z. The other, that 2y squared and that minus ay squared is good, but not that az and that minus 2x. So that can't be factored. All right, so we are going to factor some trinomials when it's in this form of ax squared plus bx plus c, and where a is not equals to 1 there. You can use two methods here so that we're going to choose here. So I'm going to show you how to do reverse FOIL, and I'm going to show you how to do the grouping method. So reverse FOIL is also known as guess and check as well. So what you're going to do is you're going to think about what two terms multiply to give you ax squared, and then what two terms multiply to give you c. And you're going to put those in there. And then you're going to check the inners and outers and see if they add up to be bx. All right, to factor by grouping there, we're going to make a big O X. And we are going to think what you're going to think here, you're going to do, we're going to write the ax squared and the c term exactly as they are. And then we're going to use this x method here, this grouping method here, to figure out the middle term. So we're going to think about what multiplies to give us AC and adds to give us B. And those two terms are going to go there, and we're going to put x's next to them. And then those are going to go in there. All right. So let me walk you through that. So using the x method here, or grouping, it goes ax squared plus bx plus c. So what multiplies to give us AC? So just look at the numbers. So that's 10, because that's 5 times 2 there. And then adds to give us the B term, which is 11. So what two numbers multiply to give you 10 and add to give you an 11? Well, you got 5 and 2 or 10 and 1. So I'm going to go with 10 and 1. And I'm going to put x's in there. So if we rewrite this over here, the first term is rewritten as, it stays as 5x squared. The last term there stays as a plus 2. But in the middle term there, we're going to put in 10x and 1x. So factor by grouping. So what's the GCF between those first two terms there? Oh yeah, they have in common a 5 and an x. So I'm left with x plus 2. The second terms there, they don't really have anything in common, so I have to say 1. And so now what do they have in common? X plus 2. What's left over on the outside? 5x plus 1. All right. So that's the way you can do it every single time if that works for you. The other thing you can do is do guess and check. So So let me do a guess and check, and then I'm going to go back there and use the grouping method. So you can think what multiplies to give you 3x squared, what multiplies to give me 2, and then you have to check the inners and outers. Do they add up there to give you 5x? No, they add up to give me 7x. So that means I'm going to have to switch that 2 and the 1 around. So if I switch those around, I get a 2x and a 3x. Do they add to give me a 5x? Yes. So you can always do guess and check. If that's easier for you. All right, let's come down here and do the x method again, or the grouping. So what multiplies to give us AC there, which is 30, that's 6 times 5, and adds to give us the middle term, which is 13. So 10 times 3 will give us 30, and 10 plus 3 there is 13. All right, let's put them in here. So this comes straight down, this comes straight down, and then these came from those terms in there. All right, so now group them together. First two, what do they have in common? They have a 2x. So I'm left with 3x plus 5. The second set, what do they have in common? A 1. So what do they have in common? 3x plus 5. What's on the outside? 2x plus 1. So there it is factored. All right, let's try some more here. So again, I'm going to kind of try out different ones here. So I'm going to try out this time. Let's go ahead and let's use the x method again, and then we'll go ahead and do guess and check for the other one. So 3 times 5 there is negative 45. And the b term there is 4. So what multiplies to give us negative 45 and adds to give us a 4? 9 and 5. But the 9 has to be larger because the 4 there is positive. So 9 times the negative 5 will give us a negative 45 and add to give us 4. So if you don't know what multiplies to give you 45, you're going to have to check on your calculator there. So now let's rewrite this. So the 3x squared came down, the negative 15 came down, and then that 9x minus 5x became the middle terms. So now factor by grouping. What do the first two terms have in common? What's the GCF? A 3 and an x. So 3x times x there is 3x squared. 3x times what is 9x? It'd be a 3. What about the second set? What do they have in common? A minus 5. So negative 5 times what is a negative 5x? It'd be an x. Negative 5 times what is a negative 15? It'd be a plus 3. So what do they have in common? X plus 3. What's left on the outside? 3x minus 5. So there we have it. All right, let's try another one. So this time I'm going to use guess and check. What multiplies to give me 10x squared? So maybe 5x and 2x. I'm thinking not 10x and 1. Sometimes those numbers get way too big, but you might have to come back to that. What multiplies to give me 14? Usually not 14 and 1. I'm going to probably have to go at 7 and 2. And then you're going to have to figure out where to put them. So if I tried here, 7 and 2, if I check those, I've got, first of all, for minus 14 there, I'm going to need a minus and a plus. And the larger products there has to be a plus. So this is larger, 7 and 2 there, gives me 14. And then these are going to give me 10. So this is going to have to give me my minus. Well, we can't really do that. So a couple different things here. If there's not a GCF in this whole problem there, it doesn't have a GCF of anything in there. See how 2 doesn't go in every single one of those terms? There's nothing there's not a GCF in that whole entire problem there. So you can't have a GCF in any of the parentheses either. And if I do that right there, if I put a 2 in there, I'm going to have a GCF of a 2 in there. So I can't put them in there together. So I know, looking at this problem here, that I had to put the 2 not by the other 2. So I had to put it in the first set of parentheses. And then the 7 is going to have to go in the second set. So again, the greater product there has to be a plus because the middle term is positive. So it's going to have to be a plus because that's going to give me a 35x. And this is going to give me a 4x, which is going to give me a minus 4x. Because we mean a minus times a plus there is going to give us a minus 14 there. So there it is factored, 5x minus 2 and 2x plus 7. All right, let's come down here and use the x method for letter F. What multiplies do you give me? 12, because 4 times 3 there is 12, AC, and adds to give me the B term, which is 7. So what times what give me 12 and adds to give me 7? Oh yeah, 4 and 3. I'm going to put x's in there. So the first term gets written down. I'm going to put my 4x and my 3x in here that I got from the x. And then I'm going to bring down the 3. So I brought down the 4x squared and I brought down the 3. And these two came from the x there. All right, let's factor by grouping. Group the first two, group the last two. So what do the first two have in common? A 4x. 4x times what is 4x squared? It'd be an x. 4x times what is 4x? It'd be a 1. The second set, what do they have in common? A 3. 3 times what is 3x? It'd be an x. 3 times what is 3? It'd be a 1. What do they have in common? X plus 1. What's left over on the outside is 4x plus 3. Well, let's try some more in here. So again, it's up to you how you like to do this. I'm going to do another guess and check. So what times what gives me 6x squared? I know I've got 6 and 1 and 2 and 3. I'm going to go with 2 and 3, knowing I might have to come back and get 6 and 1. 20, what times what gives me 20? We've got 1 and 20, 2 and 10, or 4 and 5. Well, I know from what I said before that 2 and 10 cannot go in there because both the 2x and the 3x, one of those, the 2x is going to either have a 2 in there or a 10 in with it, and that would give me a GCF. And there's not a GCF and 2 in the whole problem, so it can't be in one of the factors there. So I can cross out the 2 and 10. Generally, it's not going to be those large numbers of 1 and 20, so I'm going to go with 4 and 5. And I know not to put the 4 in with the 2 because otherwise I'd have a GCF of a 2 in there. So I'm going to put a 5 in there and a 4 there. So it says what multiplies to give me a positive 20 and adds to give me a negative. So I know I need 2 minuses. So this gives me a negative 15x. This gives me a negative 8x, and a negative 15x plus a negative 8x gives me a negative 23x. So that does indeed work. All right, let's try the next set there. Again, if you like guess and check, go for it. What times what gives you AC? That'd be a negative 20. And adds give me the middle term there, which is B, which is 19. And so now I'm thinking, oh yeah, 20 and a negative 1. Put my x's in there. I'm going to bring down the 5x squared. I'm going to put in my 20x and my minus 1x. And then I'm going to bring down my 4. Factor by grouping, I'm going to pull out my 5x. What's left? X plus 4. Second set, pull out a -1. I'm left with x plus 4. Alright, so now looking at those, what do these have in common? An x plus 4. What's left over on the outsides? 5x minus 1. Alright, and then our last one here, I'm just going to do guess and check, or reverse FOIL. What times what gives me a 2x squared? It could be a 2x, a 2 and a 2, or 4 and a 1. I'm going to go with 2 and 2. What multiplies to give me 35? Well, I'm thinking 35 and 1 or 7 and 5. So I'm going to go with 7 and 5. 1 has to be a minus and 1 has to be a plus because we've got this minus here. And then the larger product there has to be a minus because there's a minus in front of the 4x. So the larger product here is going to get is 14 there, so the minus has to go there, and the plus has to go over here. So minus 14x plus 10x does indeed give me the middle term there, a minus 4x. So that does work. So I can factor out the greatest common factor from polynomials. I can factor a polynomial using grouping, and I can factor trinomials where a is not equal to 1.